Hey there, YouTube. How you doing? I'm tired today. I'll probably be making this in bits and pieces. This is the fifth installment in my little UFO series that I've been doing, and I can only make these videos when nobody's at home because I feel stupid when my wife's wandering about the house, talking into the camera, and she's visiting a friend. But when she left, I was mudding and taping drywall in our kitchen, which I've gutted completely and replumbed and new cabinets, the whole 9 yards. And then I did the dishes, took a bunch of stuff to the garage, did some laundry, and raced out here to try to make this little intro at least before she gets home. So I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 things that I find, as usual, really odd. And first, I want to say this. I'm a little embarrassed, and I've thought about this recently a lot, that, I've made these YouTube videos, and I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but the whole question of alien life and questions about UFOs, that stuff is very rarely far from my consciousness. I'm often thinking about it when I wish I could turn it off. And I say it's embarrassing because there are people who have had much, much, much odder experiences. They've been abducted their whole lives, or they say they've been confronted with aliens while walking through the forest or whatever, or they've had multiple UFO sightings over and over, and they seem to be able to compartmentalize this stuff and move on. I've really felt the need to investigate this. I do think about it a lot. I mentioned in previous videos, about 4 years ago I had a heart attack, and I was depressed about it, and I went to a therapist for the first time in my life. And about the third session, I just started in about this UFO stuff and just unloaded. I mentioned also I've been married a few times. I got together with my current wife 7 years ago, and we had been raised right next door to each other. I've known her since I was 8. We were best friends. I've loved her my whole life. She kind of saved my life. And when her and I got together 7 years ago, whereas I'd kind of stuffed this stuff down in previous relationships, I'd mentioned it, but with her, I felt free to really explore it, talk about it openly, and because I knew that she knew me well enough to know that this absolutely was not imaginary or a lie or whatever. And so, between my therapist and her, it's been helpful, but I do think about it a lot, and I'm not sure just why. My therapist, who's a great guy, by the way, he said to me, he said, "Guy, you're like me. You're somebody who's got to have answers to questions, especially big questions. You just want answers." And I was lucky to get this guy. I still see him because I take a mild tranquilizer, and I have to see him in order to get that. So Klonopin does nothing to me that I can tell. But I was lucky to get him because he's got a little doodad that you find, it's some kind of device he goes ghost hunting, right? So what were the chances I'd get him as a therapist? So he's very broad-minded. I think he believes me as much as any human being could about the UFO stuff. So anyway, just wanted to get that out there. I don't know, I had to get it off my chest. I have a certain level of embarrassment about I also feel like maybe I'm unworthy to talk about this because there are people who have had such more profound and had a lot crazier experiences than I've had. So anyway, that is what it is. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 things. The first thing is something I call the number thing. I'm not going to explain it now. It's got, I think, some kind of shift in consciousness or something. I don't know what it is, but it's something that happened to me around the time that the blue light was around my house. And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about a weird event in our backyard here at our house here with my wife and I, Linda, that we didn't see, that our neighbor, who's a doctor, saw and came and talked to us. A really weird thing that happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm going to talk about a weird, synchronicity maybe, or I don't know what you'd call it. I had a guy track me down on Facebook who sold me a house 30 years ago. He was a realtor, and he wanted to be a friend, and I thought he was probably still selling real estate, and that wasn't the case. And he wanted to have lunch, and I didn't know why. I thought he was trying to sell me a house. I'll talk about it all. He had a really bizarre story. And I'm going to talk about that, and that's pretty much it. I think maybe one other thing, but I hope you'll find this stuff interesting. I do. I'm trying to figure all this crap out. So with that, here's my video, and thank you for stopping and visiting. Okay, so my wife isn't home yet, so I'm continuing with I mentioned what I called the number thing, and this is something that I've seen a lot about on the internet. I started Googling this recently, actually. But anyway, this is what happened. If you've seen my previous videos, you know that in '94 I saw a UFO up close. Years passed, nothing happened, and then in 2012, twice in a week, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a blue light, a beam of blue light, around my house in the city. It was crazy. And at about that time, something happened, and this is pretty kooky, and I don't know where it came from. It seemed like every time I'd look at a clock, or, not every time, but far, far too often, it was 1:11, or 5:55, or 3:33, or 11:11, or 2:22. You get the idea. I would see these sequences of numbers on the clock. And I mean, everybody does that, but I guess, I don't know. But it was happening with such frequency that I noticed it, and it started to really bother me. I mean, it kind of it was a creepy feeling because it was happening so often. And I mean, I really noted it, and then when it would happen, I was kind of getting to where I didn't want to look at a clock. I was like, oh, geez, that again, what's that about? Well, I'm 3:33, what's going on? And it faded somewhat, but I still get it in waves. It'll go away, and then I'll have a couple of weeks where it's going on all the time. And I'm like, what is this? And I never, ever associated this whatsoever with UFOs or aliens or anything. I just thought I'd developed some kind of quirk. I thought I must have just kind of organically developed a thing where I look at the clock at these times or something. I just thought it was. It got to a point where I just thought it was kind of silly and not a big deal. And when Linda and I got together 7 years ago, on numerous occasions I told her about it. I said, I get this weird thing, where I see these numbers on the clock, and I would add too that when I see these numbers, and for me, it doesn't matter what number they are. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 222 or 444 or whatever. I just get this goofy feeling. How's that for nondescript? I mean, I wish I could explain it better. I just get it's like somebody nudging me, like pay attention to this or something. I don't know that it means anything. And as I said, I never ever associated this with, seeing a UFO or the blue light thing. What would be the connection? I thought nothing, right? So about 8 months ago, I'm watching a video that I downloaded called The Seeding, and it's about abductions. And there's a gal in this video who's been abducted her entire life, she says, and I believe her. And she talks about her first conscious abduction. And I'm sitting there watching the video. And she said, I'm going to play you a snippet, but what she says is she sees a light outside of her window, and she says she'll never forget. She rolls over and looks at her clock, and she says, I'm going to play that clip in a minute, but she says something like, I'll never forget, the clock was 3:33 on the dot. And when she said that, I was like, oh boy. Here's the clip to which I just referred.
Went to bed, everything was normal, and exactly at 3:33 on the dot, I wake up and there's such a bright light, and it just annoys me because the first thing I think, who is that inconsiderate person shining this light? I go to my window and I'm looking through my blinds and I see the light even brighter. I mean, so bright that my eyes hurt, I'm squinting. And I'm trying to look behind and I'm like, that can't be a car. What is that? And I see metallic and I see the ship.
Okay, so my wife is obviously taking her time, and I've got time to continue. Having watched that video that I just played, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this woman finds significance in the fact that the clock is at 3:33 at the same time she's seeing a UFO. And when I saw that, I kind of a light bulb went on, and I went, wow, does this clock thing that I've got have something to do with, seeing UFOs, alien abduction, etc.? I mean, I'd never considered that. I had no reason to. But when I saw that, it piqued my interest. And through these YouTube videos that I've made, I've had people reach out to me. There are people who I've reached out to that I've seen their videos. I've developed a small circle of acquaintances, friends, 5 or 6 people who I'm confident have been abducted, absolutely. One of those people is a gal who I featured in one of my previous videos. Her and her husband saw a triangle just like the one I saw. In their case, they were standing on their deck. They lost time. They were obviously, in my opinion, abducted. And I called her about something else, actually, shortly after I saw that. And I was about to hang up, and I said, hey, Missy, I got a weird question for you. I said, I get this thing where I see, numbers on the clock like 1:11, 2:22, 11:11, 5:55. And I said, weird. And she was out in the woods with her husband. She had me on speakerphone. They were out with a metal detector horsing around. When I asked her that, I heard them both laugh. And she said, Guy, I have a phone full of clock pictures. She said, I see them all the time. And in fact, she said she saw these kinds of sequences on license plates and other things, which I don't. But and she, at that point too, she said, my husband and I think you've been abducted, and I have no indication of that whatsoever. But she had the same thing, so that was odd. Then I got a hold of a Facebook friend, a gal who she had seen my videos and reached out to me, and she's been abducted her entire life, she says, and I believe her. She is a business owner, highly educated, lives in New Jersey, very articulate woman, not crazy that I can tell in any way. And we have talked on Facebook, and I got a hold of her and said, hey, have you ever heard of this? And she said, are you kidding? She said, it happened to me 3 times today, and I wrote the numbers down on the clock thing. And I was like, whoa, this is getting crazy. Got another guy that reached out to me via these YouTube videos who lives in upstate New York, and he's had a really bizarre experience with some kind of being out in the woods. He and I don't even talk a lot about UFOs and aliens. We talk some, but talk a lot about remodeling and family and that sort of thing. And got a hold of him, and he said, oh yeah, that happens to me. I see the same stuff, and it's real odd. I don't know what it means. And so it was like 3 people. So then I get a hold of a guy named Brett Oldham, who I had reached out to. He's written some books. He's been abducted his whole life, he says. Again, a very normal guy. In my opinion, as much as I can tell, he's not a crazy person. And he wrote a book called Children of the Greys. That was one of the books, and I bought it. And we had talked on Messenger, and I got a hold of him and said, hey, Brett, have you ever heard of this? And he goes, oh yeah, the clock thing. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, it happens to me a lot. He said, he's a lot like me. If you search on Google for this, you'll find that there are a lot of references to it. I was shocked. A lot of people have this happen, and most of them make no connection with it to UFOs or aliens or anything like that. They refer to them as angel numbers. A lot of people do. And supposedly certain numbers mean certain things, like 1111 means you're on the right path, and this and that and the other thing. And Brett said to me, I've Googled it. People say this means that and this means that. And he said, I don't know. He said, all I know is that it happens a lot more than chance, and what it means, I don't know. But here's another guy, tells me the same thing. I got a friend who's got a cousin who she's always told me is crazy because he says that he's been abducted by aliens. And we're talking one night. This wasn't that long ago, and I mentioned this number thing, and she just went crazy. She said, oh my God, my cousin Dave says the same thing. You got to call him. He's always talking about this. So I called the guy. Same thing. Finally, the last one that I can think of is I see a psychiatric nurse because I take a mild tranquilizer, Klonopin. A real nice gal, and she's very broad-minded about all this UFO stuff. And I went and saw her, and I think I may have just said, I've told her about the UFO stuff, and I said, I got a question for you. In your clinical practice, have you ever had anybody come in and talk about seeing sequences of numbers on clocks like 111, 555, 444? She says, oh yeah. She says, remember I told you when I was working up in northern Michigan, I had a guy who said he'd been abducted his whole life? She said, that guy. That guy says the same thing exactly. In fact, she said he was also quirky about numbers in a general way, that he had to organize receipts by numbers, but that he sees this numbers on clocks, same thing. At this point, I'm like pretty much stunned because, yeah, there are a lot of people, you do a Google search, a lot of people who say they see these numbers and don't mention UFOs or aliens or experiences of any kind, but every person who I know who says they've been abducted, and even a guy I don't know, this client of this nurse, these people that say they've been, of the people I know who've been abducted, or I think have been abducted, they've all got this. And what are the chances that that could just be chance? It sort of can't. What does it mean? I have no idea. I don't see these numbers and get some message or think I'm on the right track, or I'm going to be lucky tomorrow if I buy a lottery ticket or whatever. I do feel a nudge, kind of, as I said. I feel like a hey, you should pay attention to this kind of feeling, and I don't know why. Pay attention to what? But this seems to be rampant among people who have had, particularly abductions. So that's pretty friggin' weird to me. That's the number thing. This has been a bit long, I'm sorry, but I've got to add this real quickly. After I had talked to these 5 or 6 people, whatever it was, that, had experiences with, abduction or UFOs, and they'd all had this number thing happen. At one point, I contacted a UFO researcher, Preston Dennett, who I have stayed in contact with off and on via email. Great researcher, nice guy. He's written like 14 books, probably interviewed 1,000 people or more, finds cases I've never heard of before. He's got a YouTube channel, which you should check out. Just a wonderful guy. And I sent him an email, and I thought to ask him. I said, hey, Preston, by the way, and I described this thing with the numbers, and I said, is this a feature that you see commonly among these contactees, abductees, whatever? And he said, not really. He said, I think he said, I've heard of it, but it's not common. I do not have his email in front of me. I was as perplexed by that as I was by the fact that the first 5 people I asked that I knew in my own life said they had this in spades. I'm like, how could that be? I mean, that's just, what can I say? It's confusing. But in the interest of being fair and balanced, I wanted to add that he said, because he's a great researcher, and like I said, you should definitely check out his YouTube channel. He's got a bunch of books that I need to buy some. I'd love to read them. I just haven't gotten around to it. But he said, in his experience, it wasn't common. So go figure. Maybe to get all new agey and esoteric, maybe we just find the people with whom we're connected or we're supposed to find or whatever. That's pretty out there. I don't know. But just strange that in all of his research, this was not a common thing that he found. When in my little bit of research, everybody said, oh yeah, that happens to me. Okay, it's the next day and I'm still wearing the same shirt. My wife went to Kroger's, so I've got a couple of minutes, and I'm going to talk about something that happened about 5 years ago here at the house. And I think context is kind of everything, and by that I mean the following. This is something that I might have kind of dismissed to a greater degree and not found as odd as I do, if it were not for the fact that I've seen a UFO. I've had my house engulfed in a beam of blue light a couple of times. I was at a wedding reception and had a kind of a full-blown psychic experience when I was in the presence of another UFO experiencer. I might have dismissed this otherwise, although it still would have been strange. But so this is what happened. About 5 years ago, Linda and I were sitting here. I was literally sitting in this chair at my computer, surfing the net. She was sitting over here reading a book. And our house is not that big, and it's pretty open. There's a sliding glass door over that way that goes out to a small deck that's got nothing on it, a couple of chairs, a small barbecue grill, and that's it. And we have kind of a large backyard that's empty. There's one tree in it. And there's a house that sits up over on this side. We're on about an acre. They're on about an acre and a half or 2 acres. It sits up on a hill and looks down on our house. And it sits behind us, kind of looks down at the, it sits, if they look out their window, they see the back of our house. And that's a husband and wife who are both chiropractors, and they have 3 kids. They're younger than us. Real nice people. They're kind of private. The wife is very private and not unfriendly, just kind of quiet. And when I moved out here, Linda really didn't even know their names and, didn't socialize with them. And anyway, so we're sitting here one night about 7:30 at night, me at my computer, her reading a book. Still light outside. I think it was fall probably, but it was light. And there's a knock at the door. Somebody rang the bell. And I go to the door, and Linda goes with me. And it's this lady who we don't recognize. This younger blonde lady, and she's white as a ghost, man. She looks scared to death. And she said, I just want to make sure you folks are okay. And I just want to make sure you're all right. And we were like, who is this woman and what is she talking about? And she explained that she's the neighbor from this house next door. And she said that she was in her kitchen doing dishes and looking out the window, and she said that she used the term, there was an explosion behind our house up by our sliding glass door, which is totally bizarre because we're both sitting here. It's like 15 feet from here. We didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. We're like, what? And she didn't really elaborate on what this explosion looked like, other than whatever it was significant, substantial enough that it had obviously scared the hell out of her. And I don't know why I didn't ask a lot of questions, like, what color was it, what it looked like. I didn't go into any detail. We were both so kind of shocked. And we said, we explained to her. We said, we didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything. There's nothing out there to explode. As a matter of fact, about a year ago, I was out doing the lawn. I've gotten to know her husband, who's a really nice guy. His name is Nate. And we were talking, and I asked him if she ever elaborated on this at all, what it looked like with him. And he said, not really, but he said, I know it scared the hell out of her because he said, I was out hunting when it happened. I was out in the woods. And he said, she called me on my cell phone and said, there was this explosion behind the neighbor's house, and I'm worried about them. Should I go down there and see if they're okay? And he said, well, yeah, go check on them. And he said it really, really scared the hell out of her, whatever she saw. And, with the things that have happened in my life, I've wondered, did she see some, like, ball of energy or an orb or some, something crazy like that? I don't know, because she was so frightened by it that whatever she saw, I got the impression it was odd. I wish I could go next door and kind of plumb the depths of her brain, but I get the sense that she doesn't want to talk about it. And, she's private generally, and I don't know that she would be amenable to me asking her about that. So I never have. But like I said, given the crazy damn things that have happened in my life and the fact that there is nothing out there that could have exploded or made a flash or anything, I often wondered, did she see something like a ball of light or energy, or I don't know what she saw, but it was certainly weird. And it was certainly weird that Linda and I were sitting right here. Like, there's a big archway here. There's a see-through thing down there. The sliding doors right there. We saw nothing. We heard nothing. And that's that story. I just often wonder what in the hell this woman saw exploding right up by our sliding glass door that we neither heard nor saw. So I find it real odd. Okay, it's the next day. My wife's at the dentist. I've got to go to the doctor in about 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to do what I never do and try to be really quick here. I just found this to be very interesting, and maybe you will too. I don't know. So, in 1991, I had a house fire and got a big settlement, and I worked with a realtor to buy a new house, and his name was Ron. Very nice guy, quite religious. He and I had some things in common. Well, one thing in particular, I played the piano as a young adult as my job. For many years, I played the piano in casinos and nightclubs and bars around the country, and he played the piano too. But he played in gospel groups, and a very religious guy, but very nice guy, not like some religious people who kind of shove their religion down your throat. He was very broad-minded, didn't care if you were religious or not. He was just really into playing piano for the Lord and blah, blah, blah. I really liked the guy. He was just a good guy, so a nice man. And he sold me a house in 1991, and I never saw the guy again. So about a year ago, which is like 28 years later, he reaches out to me on Facebook and wants to be a Facebook friend. And I was kind of like, why would this guy who sold me a house in 1991 want to be my Facebook friend? But I didn't want to be a jerk, and he was a really nice dude, a very likable man. And I thought, well, sure, why not? So I added him to my Facebook friend thing. Then I started getting these messages from him that he'd like to go have, he'd like to go have coffee with me or have lunch or something. And I thought, why does this guy want to have lunch with me? And I thought, well, he's probably still selling real estate, and he's probably mining for leads, the quintessential sales guys. So I really didn't want to go have lunch with him because I don't need a house. So. But he kept bugging me. He was very persistent about this, messaged me like 4 or 5 times. And my wife was in Los Angeles visiting our daughter. I'd been remodeling the house. I was kind of burnt out. I was going to take a day off. He messaged me again, and I was like, all right, let's go have lunch. I'm not much of a get-together kind of guy, but I thought, I don't want to be excuse my language, I don't want to be a dick. I'll go have lunch with you. So we agreed to meet at a Coney Island in Flint, and I got there first, and he walked in, and I said, hey, Ron, how you doing? And came over and sat down with me, and the absolute first thing out of the guy's mouth, of course, he knew that I played the piano, and I know he plays the piano, and he's a short, sawed-off guy. I think he wears a rug, a wig, and he's got this high, squeaky voice. He's kind of a different-looking kind of guy, but really a sweetheart, nice man. And he says, I really love watching YouTube videos, music videos on YouTube, and stories about bands. And I said, yeah, I do too. I said, I watch a lot of that kind of stuff, old music videos and interviews, and I know he's religious, so I was kind of reluctant to say it, but I said, I watched some UFO stuff too, because I had a sighting one time, and he says, to my surprise, he just immediately perks up, and he says, I saw a UFO. You want to hear about my story? And I mean, coming from this guy who's very religious, I was really shocked, I was like, sure, This is like, the minute he sits down, he's sitting there like 1 minute, and we're into this UFO thing, right? And he says, I was having this really vivid dream. He said, I was out in my deer blind in Davison. He's got some land near Flint where he goes out and he hunts. And he said, I was having this dream that I was out in my deer blind and I didn't get a deer, and I was really depressed. And he said, I was packing up my stuff to go home, and he said, I turned around and there was these 3 little guys with the big eyes and the big heads, like the aliens that you see on TV. And they were all standing there about 10 feet from me, just staring at me, just their eyes just boring into me. He said it was a horrible nightmare. He said I woke up in a cold sweat, just freaked out. He said it was terrible, terribly scary. He said I was all upset. And he said, he woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning. So wide awake, he tells me. He walks over to the window in his bedroom, and he looks out the window, and he says he sees these lights off in the distance, and he thinks it's an airplane, right? But they're coming towards his house kind of fast, right? And he says, as it gets closer, he said, then I realized it had lights going all the way around it, multicolored lights, and it's huge. And he said, then it just gets right above my house, and the thing's enormous, and it stops. And it's got these lights all flashing around and I'm like, holy mackerel. He said it was above his house for a minute or so, and he said then it shot off like a bullet, and he was totally freaked out. He said he called the airport, like if you've watched my earlier videos like I did, and asked them if there was anything flying around that, he should know about or that was weird. And they said, no, nothing, we haven't seen anything. Typical, for the airport. And he said, so anyway, I looked at him. I didn't know quite what to say to the guy. I said, he is very religious. And I said, Ron, I think, maybe you've had contact. And he said, well, I did think it was weird that I was having this dream about these little aliens, and then I woke up and there was this UFO above my house, and I'm like, yeah, that's like the coincidence of a friggin' year, brother. I didn't say that, but I was like, come on, you gotta be kidding me. And he said, I remember he said, I think it's the U.S. military, And he did add, too, that some guy, he said, we got a guy at church a couple of years ago told me the same darn thing. He told me a story about, like that he was on a table and being examined, This is a guy at my church, and I'm thinking, yeah, this stuff is pretty rampant. And I didn't even go into my UFO sighting whatsoever, as much as I talk in these videos. And I just dropped it right there. I did say to him, as I said, I think you might have had some contact, and, he said, well, I did think it was a coincidence. I'm like, yeah, that is like the most incredible coincidence I've ever heard of. You got to be kidding me. But I dropped that subject because I didn't want to get into it with him. Like I said, he's a very religious guy, and I did not tell him about my sighting. So there was something else I was going to add. I don't recall what it was. Oh, I know what it was. He said to me, yeah, I don't know why. You've been on my mind the last year or so. I've wanted to get a hold of you and talk to you. And I'm like, why me? You sold me a house 30 years ago, 29 years ago. By the way, too, him wanting to meet with me had nothing to do with real estate. He told me that shortly after he sold me my house, he went through a divorce and totally got out of real estate and had devoted his professional life completely to making a living, playing in gospel bands and playing at churches, and that was all he did. So had nothing to do with the real estate. And I've had a couple of people that I've told about this tell me, well, maybe he saw your YouTube videos. Ron is a real chatterbox. Nice guy, fun to talk to. And I feel absolutely certain that had he seen my YouTube videos, he would have said so. So there's no way. He would have said something. So, I find it interesting that after you have a close-up UFO sighting, in many cases, and in my case, it seems like it's only kind of the beginning of these strange events that happen subsequently. These weird synchronicities and chance meetings, and this stuff just kind of keeps rolling. I don't know why, and that's, you can speculate, who knows. I don't know why, but that's been the case in my life. So I want to say thank you for stopping in again, and say thanks again for spending some time with me and sharing my little journey here as I try to sort through all this stuff and make sense of it. It's a curiosity to me. I may have one more video in me. I've said before that I'd like to make a video about a little bit more about myself, who I am, how this has affected me. It's been a bit of a rocky road in my case. Not all bad, but it certainly has consumed a lot of my thoughts for the last, 30 years or so. And a couple of times when I've talked about it, I've got surprisingly emotional, which for me is unusual. It's a bit traumatic, but I may have one more video in me. I don't know, but it's a weird time in the history of the world. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on politically, and of course COVID-19. I sincerely hope you're staying safe. I hope you're well. I send you my best wishes, and so grateful that you take the time to stop and see me. And perhaps I will make another video, as I said. If I do, I look forward to seeing you. For now, I'm out. Peace to you and yours. Stay safe.